What if, at this very moment, the most consequential and fateful turning point of the war is taking shape before our eyes, and yet, almost no one truly sees it coming? Imagine standing on the edge of a seismic shift in history, only to realize that the world's gaze is elsewhere, distracted by headlines that miss the gravity of what is really unfolding. Such is the situation now in Pokrovsk, a city whose name was once little more than a minor note in military briefings, but which has rapidly become the epicenter of a high-stakes military drama that may well redefine the course of the conflict, and perhaps the global order itself. To many, Pokrovsk was just another dot on the map, a city whose significance was overshadowed by larger, more famous battles elsewhere in Ukraine. But today, Pokrovsk is the scene of a looming catastrophe. Ukrainian defenders, entrenched in this once bustling hub, now face the grim prospect of operational encirclement. Russian forces are advancing from multiple directions, their grip tightening with every passing hour. The ultimatum they have issued to the defenders is stark and chilling: evacuate immediately, or face utter destruction. Those who remain may be doomed to a fate remembered for generations. But what makes this standoff more than just another siege is the way it has unsettled the world far beyond the Ukrainian steppe. In Western capitals, from Washington to Berlin, from Paris to Helsinki, a sense of unease is growing. The reasons are not limited to the battlefield maneuvers around Pokrovsk. Recent Russian actions, such as the sudden appearance of an amphibious warship off the German coast, as well as far-reaching strategic missile drills, have reverberated through NATO, sparking urgent debates and recalibrations of military readiness. Are we, perhaps, witnessing the moment when the entire trajectory of the war shifts? Is Pokrovsk the crack in the wall that signals a broader collapse? The crisis here upends the comfortable assumptions that have dominated Western thinking for months. The idea that the front has stagnated, that Ukraine could soon achieve a breakthrough, or that Russian advances would grind to a halt under the weight of sanctions and attrition. Instead, what is taking place points to a cold, calculated, and possibly transformative approach by Russian forces. If this is true, the consequences could be immense, not only for Ukraine, but for the strategies of leaders worldwide. To overlook this inflection point would be more than a simple cartographic error. It would mean misreading the war's future, misallocating billions of dollars in aid, and gravely underestimating the dangers now facing the West and its allies. History is replete with examples of such miscalculations. The fall of Singapore during the Second World War, for example, was preceded by months of dismissive analysis in London, with leaders convinced that the city's defenses were unbreakable. When the city fell in just over a week, the shockwaves reshaped the entire theater of war in the Pacific. To understand how we reached this critical moment in Pokrovsk, we need to trace the chain of events, both seen and unseen, that led to this point of peril. The story begins many months earlier, with warning signs that few recognized at the time. In military history, pivotal moments are often preceded by a series of subtle shifts: changes in supply lines, the redeployment of units, the increasing tempo of artillery fire, that seem trivial until, suddenly, they combine to produce a crisis. Why has Pokrovsk, known in Soviet times as Krasnoarmysk, become the latest flashpoint in this shifting landscape? The answer lies in the city's unique geography and its pivotal role in the war's unfolding narrative. Pokrovsk sits at a crucial crossroads where major road and rail arteries intersect. For Ukrainian forces, this city has become more than a waypoint. It is a fortified bulwark, a shield holding back Russian advances and protecting the deeper Ukrainian heartland. For many months, Pokrovsk has anchored a defensive line that has absorbed wave after wave of Russian attacks. Now, that pressure has escalated to a breaking point. Russian troops have intensified their offensive, transforming Pokrovsk into a crucible for Ukraine's defenders. After weeks of grinding combat, fighting measured in meters, sometimes even less, the city now faces a coordinated assault. The evidence is clear. The encirclement is tightening, and the city's defenders are being squeezed with remorseless precision. This is not simply another episode of attrition. It could signal a breach with the potential to upend the broader front, much as the fall of Stalingrad in the Second World War marked a decisive shift in momentum, even though, at the time, many did not see the full implications. The city's lifelines are being severed. The primary supply and evacuation routes, the roads and railways that kept the defenders supplied, are now either under relentless shelling or have been cut entirely. What remains are risky rural tracks and open fields, all highly exposed to drones, artillery, and airstrikes. Every attempt to move, whether bringing in reinforcements, evacuating the wounded, or resupplying ammunition, has become a deadly gamble. The history of warfare is filled with such moments, from the encirclement at Dien Bien Phu to the siege of Sarajevo, where the loss of supply lines spelled doom for the defenders. These are not empty warnings. Even Ukrainian military bloggers, who have often remained stoic in the face of adversity, are now expressing open concern. Reliable sources report neighborhoods under near-constant bombardment, isolated units battered and running low on supplies, and escape corridors shrinking by the hour. Frontline soldiers echo this sense of alarm. Without a dramatic change in the situation, Pokrovsk's defense could collapse suddenly and catastrophically, reminiscent of the rapid fall of Mosul in 2014, when a few days of chaos undid years of defense planning. Missing the full picture, Pokrovsk's map position, its defensive value, and this acute logistical breakdown, means underestimating just how close the city is to falling. More crucially, it risks overlooking the broader stakes. Pokrovsk's fate could shift momentum across the entire theater of war, with consequences rippling far beyond its battered streets. One need only look at the fall of Vukovar in the Yugoslav wars, when a single city's collapse sent shockwaves throughout the region. But what exactly makes Pokrovsk's location so decisive, and why are both sides pouring so many resources into this fight? To answer that, we need to zoom in on the city's geography and its place in the region's complex web of transportation and defense. Pokrovsk is situated at the intersection of several major highways and railway lines that connect eastern Ukraine to the rest of the country. It serves as a logistical hub, allowing for the rapid movement of troops, equipment, and supplies. Historically, control of such hubs has often determined the outcome of wider campaigns. Consider how the control of Bastogne in the Ardennes offensive during the Second World War prevented German forces from breaking out and capturing Antwerp. In Pokrovsk, Ukrainian forces now face a brutal ultimatum: evacuate the city within days, or risk utter destruction. Russian commanders have delivered their message: withdraw or be wiped out. This warning reverberates through official statements, intercepted communications, and desperate frontline chatter, amplifying the sense of dread among the defenders. The psychological impact of such ultimatums cannot be understated. In conflicts from the siege of Leningrad to the fall of Aleppo, the threat of annihilation has often been used as a weapon in its own right, undermining morale and sowing panic. The cause of the urgency in Pokrovsk is cold and clear. Russian troops now dominate nearly every major road, highway, and vital supply artery leading in or out of the city. Any attempt to escape or bring in reinforcements has to cross open ground, already under relentless artillery shelling and constant drone surveillance. Every movement becomes a roll of the dice, with death lurking at every turn. One can draw a parallel with the encirclement at Debaltsev in 2015, where Ukrainian forces found their escape routes reduced to narrow corridors, each step forward threatened by incoming fire. Within the city itself, particularly in the industrial zones grimly nicknamed the Citadel by Ukrainian soldiers, the fiercest urban battles rage. Each building, each factory floor becomes a contested fortress, much as the apartment blocks of Grozny or the ruins of Fallujah became in their own respective wars. The fighting is measured in meters. Neither side is willing to give ground, yet with every hour, Ukrainian positions shrink, fractured by the relentless squeeze from all sides. The exhaustion is palpable. The defenders are forced to make impossible choices: hold at all costs, or risk a retreat that could collapse into chaos. What truly tips the balance is not just the struggle on the ground, but the domination overhead. Russian air superiority is now overwhelming. Drones loiter above the city day and night, feeding real-time intelligence to artillery and directing precision strikes from aircraft. Bombs and missiles rain down on strong points, command centers, and makeshift supply caches. Ukrainian defenders cannot regroup, resupply, or retreat without exposing themselves to devastating attacks. This mirrors the experience of Syrian rebels in Aleppo, where constant aerial bombardment eventually broke the back of the resistance. Even Ukrainian officials now publicly acknowledge that key districts have been lost. Defensive lines once seen as unbreakable have buckled and collapsed. In desperation, small groups attempt last-minute evacuations or repositioning, but many are forced to abandon equipment and wounded comrades, often under direct fire. The scenes are reminiscent of the last days of the Warsaw Uprising, when defenders found themselves isolated, cut off, and forced to make harrowing choices. This unyielding assault has carved the battlefield into isolated pockets of resistance. These encircled groups, surrounded and cut off, become cauldrons where survival is measured by the minute. The psychological toll is immense. Inside, hope fades quickly, and discipline is tested to its limits. For Ukrainian commanders and their international partners, the looming fall of Pokrovsk is more than a tactical setback. It is a critical node lost, and a psychological blow that could reverberate across the entire front, much as the capture of Singapore in 1942 shattered British prestige in Asia. Yet, Pokrovsk is only one piece of a much larger, shifting landscape. How might these dramatic setbacks reshape the broader dynamics across hundreds of kilometers of embattled front lines? To answer this, we must consider the ripple effects that have historically followed the loss of key strongholds. When Sevastopol fell in the Crimean War, for example, it set off a chain reaction that altered the balance of power in the Black Sea region. The collapse in Pokrovsk sends shockwaves far beyond the city itself. To grasp the true impact, we need to examine how these events are rippling through the wider theater of war. Is the sudden collapse of Ukrainian defenses in Pokrovsk merely a tactical setback, or does it mark the beginning of a much wider and more dangerous shift? What is unfolding here is not a contained failure, but a shockwave that reverberates across the entire Eastern Front. Russian advances in recent days have placed Ukrainian commanders under relentless pressure, forcing them to commit dwindling reserves and stretch their lines thinner with every kilometer lost. The pattern is unmistakable. While Russian progress has slowed in some directions, such as the northern approaches, where units paused after their initial surge, the broader operational tempo is accelerating. Russia is consolidating its gains, moving fresh units into critical sectors, and methodically expanding its grip, tightening the noose around several key strongholds. Battles now rage along a widening arc, from the approaches to Konstantinovka, through the battered industrial zones near Ugledar, to embattled settlements around Kupiansk and Liman. For Ukrainian forces, each new hotspot drains precious reserves, leaving little time or space to regroup before the next crisis erupts. The stakes no longer stop at the front lines. In Western capitals, officials are watching with growing unease as Russia signals not only intent, but also capacity. The sudden appearance of a Russian amphibious warship near German coastal waters, the launch of new strategic missile drills, and the redeployment of units into Belarus all send an unmistakable message. These moves are calculated to remind NATO, and especially its newest members, Finland and Sweden, that the repercussions of this war could reach far beyond Ukraine's borders. In Helsinki and Stockholm, the conflict no longer feels distant. Military planners are scrambling to reassess defenses and update contingency plans, as the shadow of escalation looms uncomfortably close. Western media's tone has shifted. Gone is the earlier optimism about Ukrainian breakthroughs or imminent Russian collapse. Now, a sober realism prevails. Analysts who once dismissed Russia's war machine as brittle now confront a harsher truth. Despite sanctions and significant losses, Russian military and industrial systems have proven unexpectedly resilient. Instead of faltering, Russia is adapting, accelerating drone production, overhauling logistics, and keeping its forces supplied and fighting. This is where the real danger lies. How Western leaders, strategists, and the public interpret these developments will define the next phase of the conflict. Decisions about arms shipments, escalation, or negotiations will rest on whether these events are viewed as a fleeting setback or as the first moves in a deeper, more perilous transformation. Misreading the momentum could mean missing crucial opportunities or triggering unintended spirals of escalation that no one can fully control. We have seen this before in history. In 1950, United Nations forces in Korea believed the war was won, only to be shocked by the sudden entry of Chinese forces, which reversed months of hard-fought gains. The lesson is clear. Underestimating an adversary's resilience and ability to adapt can lead to catastrophic consequences. The central question is now impossible to ignore. If Russian gains continue at this pace, what scenarios might unfold next? And what, if anything, could stop or reverse this new momentum? Could we see a chain reaction, where the fall of Pokrovsk triggers withdrawals elsewhere, as happened in the collapse of the French front in 1940? Or will Ukrainian forces be able to regroup and mount a stubborn defense, drawing on reserves held further west? Yet even as the situation darkens, uncertainty lingers. The coming weeks will test not just the resilience of armies, but also the resolve and judgment of those watching from afar. Every decision, whether to hold, to withdraw, or to seek negotiations, will have consequences that cascade through alliances and capitals. When old maps no longer lead the way, who adapts and who pays the price? In Pokrovsk and across the front, that question is being answered in real time, with consequences rippling far beyond the battlefield. Consider the lessons of the First World War, when outdated tactics led to catastrophic losses at the Somme and Passchendaele, until new methods of warfare were adopted, sometimes too late for those already in the trenches. The fight has shifted from chaotic skirmishes to a phase defined by planning, precision, and relentless innovation. Drones now circle overhead day and night, feeding real-time intelligence to artillery crews and commanders. Decisive moments are shaped less by individual heroics than by which side can sustain unity, keep supplies moving, and maintain clear, rapid information under constant threat. In this sense, the war is becoming a contest not just of strength, but of adaptability and resilience. The hard lesson is this: logistics and cohesion now rival firepower in importance. The side that controls the flow of ammunition, food, and medicine, and keeps its units coordinated, holds the real upper hand. In Pokrovsk, Russian forces have severed key roads, boxed in defenders, and turned every Ukrainian movement into a risk. Ukrainian troops, though determined, are forced onto perilous escape routes and must stretch dwindling stocks ever further. This relentless pressure grinds down both armies. Weeks of attrition breed exhaustion, frayed nerves, and a new kind of solidarity, or in some cases, bitter mistrust. Loyalty within squads and the bond between leaders and fighters becomes as crucial as any weapon. Adaptation is survival. Confusion or stubbornness can mean catastrophe. The story of the Anabasis, when Xenophon led tens of thousands of Greek mercenaries out of Persia, is a testament to the power of leadership and adaptability in the face of encirclement and relentless pursuit. The mood has shifted in official reports as well. Where once bombast and bravado dominated, now both Ukrainian and Russian channels echo a sober realism. Ukrainian voices acknowledge grave danger. Russian sources, though often confident, quietly stress the cost of every advance. This realism reflects not only fatigue, but the growing complexity and unpredictability of the war. For civilians, each day brings harsher choices. Humanitarian corridors, when they exist, are perilous, often targeted by snipers or monitored by drones. The struggle to find food, water, and even a moment's safety has become all-consuming. Some residents wait for evacuation, others must gamble everything to flee. Loyalties fracture under pressure, and the lines between occupier, defender, and survivor blur as days wear on. The stories from Grozny and Sarajevo remind us how urban warfare punishes civilians most cruelly. For leaders, analysts, and distant observers, Pokrovsk is a warning in bold print. Escalation, new technology, and relentless pressure can overwhelm strong defenses in weeks, not years. Failing to adapt costs not just territory and lives, but also morale, credibility, and the ability to shape what comes next. When the Maginot Line was outflanked in 1940, it was not just a military defeat. It was a psychological shock that reverberated throughout France and beyond. So as Pokrovsk's fate hangs in the balance, what lessons can be drawn from this frontline turning point? History offers several practical steps for those seeking to avoid similar catastrophes. First, intelligence must be updated continuously. Relying on outdated maps or assumptions can be fatal. Second, logistics must be prioritized, ensuring that supply lines are redundant and flexible. Third, adaptability must be encouraged at every level, from the highest command to the smallest squad. Finally, the human element, morale, leadership, and unity, must never be neglected. The choices made here will echo across the conflict, shaping strategies and alliances far beyond the city's battered streets. In the next act, we follow how these shifts ripple outward, redrawing the boundaries of both war and diplomacy. Already, diplomats in Brussels, Washington, and Moscow are recalibrating their approaches, debating whether to double down, seek negotiation, or prepare for new escalations. The front is shifting, and so is the story. Are you keeping pace or falling behind? The fate of nations can turn on whether their leaders recognize and adapt to new realities. The history of the Russo-Japanese War, for example, shows how a failure to recognize the implications of naval losses led to diplomatic humiliation at Portsmouth. In moments like these, danger is not confined to the battlefield. It lurks in the stories we accept, the narratives we repeat, and the assumptions we let shape our view of the world. The headlines may talk of stalemates or hint at dramatic comebacks, but if we turn away from the hard realities unfolding, we risk missing the truth. Right now, Pokrovsk is not just another flashpoint. It has become a pivotal crossroads. Ukrainian forces are facing the threat of operational encirclement. Their last lifelines are under relentless pressure, and the window for withdrawal is narrowing with every hour. This is more than a local crisis. It is a warning that the momentum of the entire war could be swinging in a new direction. Western media for months has framed this conflict as a static grind, or at worst, a temporary lull before Ukraine regains the initiative. But the facts emerging from Pokrovsk and from across the front tell a different story. Russian advances are slow but systematic, carving away at Ukrainian positions and redrawing the operational map. Every gain, every encirclement, carries weight far beyond the trenches. This is not only about ground lost or gained. It is about evolving military technologies, new tactics, and the signals these shifts send to the world. Each move reverberates outward, testing alliances, questioning the wisdom of enormous investments, and pressing on the fragile timelines of escalation or negotiation. The same dynamics were at play in the early days of the Cold War, when small moves in Berlin or Korea signaled much larger shifts in global strategy. For viewers like you, the stakes are immense. Clinging to yesterday's assumptions or reassuring narratives can leave you unprepared as history speeds up. Billions of dollars in support, the reputations of national leaders, and the very cohesion of international coalitions are now bound up in this unfolding reality. As the conflict enters a new and unpredictable phase, on the battlefield and in the world's capitals, it has never been more vital to look past familiar stories. Question the easy answers. Verify the facts. Be willing to adapt, even when the truth is uncomfortable. The front is on the move, and so is the narrative. Are you ready to move with it? This is the moment to pay attention, to learn the lessons of history, and to recognize that, sometimes, the most important battles are not those that make the biggest headlines, but those that quietly, inexorably, change the course of the future.